Hello, Recursive community, and welcome back to our podcast series. Our next guest is a seasoned manager who walked all the way from consulting to entrepreneurship to ecosystem building. Momchil Vassilev is the managing director of the global entrepreneurial network Endeavor for Bulgaria. In his role, he helps create a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem and nurture founders with global ambitions, the ability to scale fast, and give back mindset. Prior to that, Vassilev has over 20 years of experience in management and business development. He co-founded the biotech company called Provity and exited it very successfully, led the corporate development of via investment group, and oversaw audits, mergers and acquisitions at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Momchil, it's very, very dear to me that you're here.
Thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure. It's
been actually high time that you're here. I'm almost feeling guilty that we didn't invite you earlier. I have to say, because the way that I see you as an ecosystem builder, the way that I got to know you, you are very conscious in your actions, in what you do, and very optimistic about the future of the Bulgarian ecosystem. And in this sense, I still would like to bring you a bit back in time to the beginning of your career. You kicked off your professional experience at PricewaterhouseCoopers at the young age of 17. How did you experience? The experience there paved your way from your own business venture? I'm going to say it again. Not from, for. How did your experience there pave the way for your own business adventure afterwards?
You actually just reminded me what a long time ago this was, because back then it was still Pricewaterhouse. The Coopers was not in the picture yet. Well, starting off in a consultancy firm at that time, at that age, I believe was a great school of life, if you wish. Because it taught me several things, probably key of which is work ethics. You know, getting it done is the main motto at this kind of trade. And this kind of resilience actually served me very well onwards in any sort of venture that I took on.
But isn't it early at the age of 17 to learn resilience? I mean, isn't it still the time where you're supposed to have fun and party and you haven't even finished school at this point.
I was grade 11 back then, and it was borderline illegal what I did and what PW did at the time, but there we go. These were the times. Well, I didn't miss the fun part. Actually, I had a lot of fun, and probably that was the reason why I stuck with this organization for quite some time. I spent the next 17 years of my life within this organization, and the fun was a major part of it. So I kind of got the best of both worlds. What it also taught me is that it's very important to stay relevant. You know, being a consultant, you have to be relevant to the people you work with. You have to bring more value to them than what they already have, which necessitates also the constant needs to learn. You have to stay ahead of the game in order to actually be able to add value to your customers, to tell them something that they don't know already. So these two things, staying relevant, solving relevant issues, and constant learning, were also kind of key traits that helped me along the way further on.
How about people skills? I'm thinking that the consultant always is, in a way, also maybe a therapist, maybe for your business, but you have to have certain people skills in order to accompany business leaders, managers on their path to understanding certain things that maybe sometimes they don't want to look at.
True. And the major part of this is gaining their trust. There are a couple of ways to gain their trust. First of all, it's you have to appear trustful. And by the way, that's the reason why I actually put on glasses back then, spectacles. I didn't need them, but I was only 17 and I needed to look respectful to all my clients. So there we go. I put some glasses on. And then, of course, you have to make sense.
Yes.
You have to really deliver on the ideas, on the commitments that you take on. Mm-hmm. And this is how you become really a partner to the people you work with.
Yeah. So having these important skills in your backpack, at some point you decided that you're going to do your own venture. Still, after 17 years in a corporation, and that's a big corporation, where you have also the culture, which is not probably necessarily very entrepreneurial. How did you dare to make the step? It's almost unimaginable.
You said it's not very entrepreneurial, but it's actually true and not true.
Okay.
It depends how you position yourself and how do you play it. Okay. As a matter of fact, I had my first entrepreneurial venture while I was still with PwC. Mm-hmm. And I did it for PwC. My first entrepreneurial venture was developing the office of PwC in Varna. Okay. It was basically a startup that I had to build. And it ended up being a fairly successful operation at some point. Then I moved to a couple of other experiments. I'm a huge fan of National Geographic, so at some point I convinced some friends to start importing National Geographic merchandise in Bulgaria and also producing all sorts of products with the brand, to the surprise of National Geographic, of course. So you get to learn from the people you interact with and your customers, your clients. Some of them are corporates, but back then we started to work quite actively with Bulgarian entrepreneurs. Okay. So it was a huge inspiration for me to see how these people build their businesses and the path they went through. That led me to gather some courage and just jump into the void at some point. And it was a very educational experience, let's put it this way. On the one hand, you capitalize on the contacts that you have built over all those years, on the knowledge you have accumulated over all those years. And yet, it doesn't even compare to the experience you get when you start doing it yourself. So again, that taught me a huge respect to the entrepreneurs that I've been meeting along the way. The venture itself was as I said, educational process, an expensive educational process.
Okay.
So it was fun.
Which were the challenges that maybe you faced and which gave you the most important lessons? Because I think we actually learn most from the hard times, right? And
inevitably.
Usually when we jump into a venture on our own, or a venture of our own, we are a bit too optimistic of what is coming ahead, and we jump because we don't know what is coming ahead. This is usually the story that I actually hear from guests here, and which I can also confirm from my side. So, unexpected challenges, and what did you learn from them? Do you remember?
Lots of them, obviously. One lesson I learned is that when you go into an adventure like this, you better have a partner.
Okay.
There's nothing better than having someone to pick you up when you're down and nothing worse to be alone on this trip, both facing challenges and also celebrating some success. So I had the chance and the luck to convince at that time my brother to join me in this adventure, and that was a huge help for me. And I also had a very dedicated team. And that you asked me about the lessons. If there's one thing you should do is to gather around you, a good group of people, like-minded people that are also willing to take this risk, to jump into this void, and not to regret it, not to complain about the outcomes if they're negative, and push forward. So this kind of, again, resilience is something that is probably my biggest lesson.
And there is maybe a little gap, so between your own venture and Endeavor. Still, what brought you to Endeavor? Can you maybe follow the story? What happens afterwards? So you sold the company, right?
Yes. No, actually, it's still operational. Does some interesting projects. We just spun off the R&D part and the investment part. So there's a dedicated team who deals with the R&D part now, trying to develop and almost there to develop a new formula for the beer industry.
Wow.
That would make the beer healthy.
A healthy beer. Isn't it healthy already?
Even healthier. So Endeavor kind of happened alongside of this. I got a call from a couple of friends who are still serving in the Endeavor's board in Bulgaria. They said, you know what, we were discussing that you might probably be a good fit for this role. What do you think? And at that time, I knew very little about Endeavor. So the more I started to learn, in order to give them some feedback, obviously, the more I started to learn about Endeavor, I thought to myself, look, how awesome it would have been if there was Endeavor when I was starting my venture. That would save me a lot of pain, even more money, and mostly a lot of time. Just through the interaction with people who have been through this process and could have told me, what to avoid and who to meet and how to raise funds, for example, for this. When I was starting Provity, none of this was available. So Endeavor sounded so much relevant to me, to my entrepreneurial experience. And I thought that, if it sounds relevant to me, it's probably very relevant to a lot of other people. And
what year was that?
That was 2016.
2016.
Yeah.
Wow.
Towards the end of 16. And it also combined a few things that I really like to do. First of all, meeting people, connecting people, helping them in any way. In PwC, I was doing it for, I was charging for this. Now I had the chance to do it, for the sake of it. And then being part of the success of so many is very rewarding personally. So there is this selfish element there too.
I remember I was talking to a successful person years back, and he told me there is no true altruism. In the end, we do good because it makes us feel good. It's actually very selfish.
That's very true. That's very true. You feel really good about what you're doing, and that's your reward. The good thing is that it also helps others. You know what? Last year, the highlight of my last year was the fact that I was invited to deliver a commencement address at my son's school.
Wow.
Big challenge, biggest of the years. It took me quite some time to figure out what should I tell these kids, something that's meaningful, that makes sense, and on the other hand, to just keep their attention for more than 30 seconds. These are people about to have a big party. Mm-hmm. So it took me a lot of.
I'm very interested in that. I think these commencement speeches are sometimes very wise because it really makes us think and digest the wisdom.
The expectation.
Exactly.
But it also needs to be fun, because of the occasion. So I did a lot of self-reflection and soul-searching about what am I good at? How do I make myself useful? And I came up with the idea that I'm all about, connecting people. So this gave birth to the sort of the line I started with, telling these kids that my name is Momchil Vassilev, and by conviction I'm a pimp. In Bulgarian, the root of the word pimp actually is the same as the one for bringing people together.
Yes.
So there we go. That's what I do. That's what I enjoy doing.
But I can so much relate to that. My whole life I felt like I don't know my calling. I remember when I finished school, I literally went to my mom and I asked her, what should I study? What am I good at? Because I had all the good notes. That was like a must in my family. You have to have the good notes, but then where is your talent? And I could never really figure it out until the moment when I realized, and that was when I came back to Bulgaria. And then I also got to know you. In the beginning, I knew 2 or 3 people in Sofia. I'm not speaking about our entrepreneurial ecosystem. I didn't know anyone. But I just applied this rule. You have to get to know the people. And then things start to emerge, synergies start to appear. And
one thing leads to another.
One thing leads to another. And here we are.
True.
But it's a talent or a skill that is very hard to recognize, because in the end you're not really doing something. You're just having fun talking to people, listening to their stories, right? Yeah, and making connections. These two, maybe they can help each other.
True. That's why I said that it took me a lot of self-reflection, to realize that this is actually why I'm probably relevant to some people.
What else did you figure out about yourself? What else are you good at? Or what do you suck at? Also, tell me.
I'm suck at patience.
Okay. Yes.
Hence, I started work at 17.
Yeah.
I probably never won. I was in swimming, all sorts of other things. Never won first prize for anything, but I won prizes for being the youngest doing it quite a few times.
So you were rushing to be a grown-up. And initially, what did you want to be as a grown-up when you were a kid?
Oh, lots of things. Astronomer, travel guide. As I mentioned, I love geography. Can't remember all of them.
And let me guess, you're also someone who has very versatile interests. I mean, we see you in your professional capacity, but at home you're probably interested in all sorts of things. I mean, you mentioned National Geographic, obviously.
That's true, and that's probably something I really like about myself, is that you have to be curious about the world. That can give you a lot of ideas, ideas that work in very unexpected and amazing ways later on in your life. So learning about different things, from history to physics to cultures and geography, all this somehow then combines into a good idea, someone that you know.
Associations, the links, the lateral thinker. You mentioned before that you suck at patience, and at the same time you're working for a cause that actually requires a lot of time. So I think making impact and seeing the fruits of it requires patience. At the same time, when you're impatient, maybe you would be much more rushing it and focusing it and bringing change a bit faster than someone who is patient. I can't say. Still, can you share a bit more about the mission of Endeavor, and also how is it applied here in Bulgaria? You started 2016, 2017 probably in this period.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are 5-6 years.
Almost 7.
Almost 7 years.
Yeah.
Do you feel what you've done is fruitful? I'm not going to share my opinion yet.
Now, first of all, about the patience, with the age, I'm getting a little bit better.
Okay. Sorry to hear that.
But you are right that the kind of things that we do, we all do actually, you, me, everyone in this ecosystem, they require time. It takes some accumulation in quantity to achieve a change in quality.
Yes.
So you learn to play a long game. Mm. And then you realize that even achieving small size success every day, they tend to accumulate to something more substantial. And the patience part comes when you have to really wait until the right moment to move to the next level. Mm-hmm. So yes, Endeavor is all about helping what we call high impact entrepreneurs to grow big, and through their success to impact the economy and the society in general. And this is what we do. We have to find them, we have to help them, and we have to install or inspire them for this give back mentality that we're all about. Mm-hmm. It takes time because it's a cultural shift for many people because of the genesis.
The hardest.
Probably, yeah. Yes. But you see that initially you have 1 or 2 people that get it, one or two people that have a sizable success, then they're 5, then they're 10, and then they start to help the others. And then now we have, I think, over 50 companies across our 3 programs. Mm-hmm. We have some of our entrepreneurs who we found deeply underground, like Presi, who you know well. Yes, who are now very active in the ecosystem. Yes. He's a board member at Endeavor. He's an active investor and supporter, and quite a few others. Mm-hmm. And that's very rewarding, to see. And that makes you believe, convinces you that this thing is possible. It just takes more effort, more time, and more perseverance again to push it through. So yeah, I see the results of our work now. I see the ecosystem coming to a stage where it can really jump to the next level, and this is where our next mission probably lies as an organization, to try to galvanize this jump, to make sure that everyone else in the ecosystem is sort of prepared for this and also equipped with the necessary resources to jump there, because we cannot do it on our own.
I remember spending once hours in your office, and I wanted to know, first of all, what are high impact entrepreneurs? And I think it might be worth it to share a bit more about it. And second of all, what is give back mentality? Because these are things which are, they're very abstract. They're like constructs.
True.
Yeah. And at the same time, these are the things that may have a huge effect on how are we going to develop as an ecosystem, because it's not about the single stories of each of, but it's about building like the backbone of this entrepreneurial ecosystem so that we can all move together. And this is what you do. And it's very invisible. Sometimes it might feel very invisible.
Again, because it takes a lot of time and patience to accumulate sufficient critical mass before it starts to become visible.
Yes.
High impact. High impact is probably defined by two things. First of all, it's the size, inevitably. That's why we really want to help these entrepreneurs to achieve a certain size of their ventures. And that's why we are focused in the scale-up space of the entrepreneurial journey, because that's when they create most value, most jobs, most capital for the economy. So part of the impact is this, but even more important part of the impact, of the high impact, is the state of mind.
Okay.
Sometimes it's not just about the size of your business, but the size of your energy, or the level of your energy that you spread around in the ecosystem. By helping others, by connecting people, by bringing ideas to the table. And this is also very important. It's, by the way, it's not just reserved to commercial entrepreneurs. Yeah. We do have some great examples in our ecosystem about people who are in my mind, high impact entrepreneurs in their own right, because they do great social work. Just to mention Lazar's initiatives. They do great educational projects like Telerik Academy, or even they do some things that are relevant for the environment, like Sergei's Beehive, for example. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to make a lot of money to do this. Okay. Now, we as an organization, we're focused on the commercial part, of course. But it doesn't mean that we are not trying to help everyone else. Again, through our network, through our resources. Give back mentality is a key part of all this, of this high impact, because you can be really successful. There are many ways to make money. It's about how you spend those money and those resources. Money are just a resource. You accumulate resources through your success. And if you don't have this give back mentality, this realization that you're a product of the environment you're part of. My favorite quote, "No man is an island," by John Donne. You are part of the whole. Yeah. So it's your responsibility actually to pay back, to help others do this. And eventually it's a little bit selfish as well, because by creating a better environment around yourself, you live a better life. You have a better working or business conditions. So it's to a certain extent self-serving, and that's okay. Yes, the more you, and that's actually a virtuous circle. The more you give back, the better environment becomes. The better you are. Nothing wrong with this. Nothing wrong with this.
Of course not. Of course not.
And it's a game. Also, if we move away from philosophy and towards physics and mathematics, it's a gaming theory. It's a game theory. If we are in the game just to take, eventually we all lose. But if we realize that it's important to play with the others, then it's a mutual success.
How would you describe, or what made the impact of Endeavor Bulgaria on the Bulgarian entrepreneurial ecosystem visible? How would you describe? How do you see that? What have you achieved? Maybe there is a situation, maybe there is a conversation, maybe there is a statement of someone. When did you feel and knew that, okay, this is it, this is what we do, and it's going well?
No, first of all, it's very tempting to take the credit that we've changed the ecosystem or the environment in any way. Again, we are just part of the picture, part of the puzzle. I'd like to think that we have probably inspired other players in the ecosystem to dream bigger and to be more active, and we help quite a lot of them in many ways. But it's a joint effort, and it's a joint success, to be honest. So I would rather highlight the success of the ecosystem as a whole compared to when we started this this venture. Back then, it was a very obscure sect of people from the point of view of the general public who were doing some fancy stuff, not necessarily practical in terms of entrepreneurial ventures. Now, I would say that these days entrepreneurship is going into mainstream. More and more people, again, from the general public, understand and appreciate what the new wave of entrepreneurship, the new model of entrepreneurship is all about. And the impact it brings not just to the economy, but also to the society in terms of values, in terms of aspirations, if you wish. It's still a bubble, but it's a much bigger bubble. Okay. And there is a clear path how we can actually grow it even bigger.
I want to hear more about it afterwards, but finish your thought.
So that's, to me, that's a big success. We now have even the political establishment that understands the value or at least the importance of this particular part of the society and this particular part of the industry, the economy, and understand that it's somehow unavoidable part, and actually not that they're trying to avoid it, but it's actually important for the future of our country and our society.
It's an integral part.
To work with it and to support it going forward, because it's a dynamic word, and it's again about relevance. If you don't ride the wave will just crush you. Exactly.
Okay.
So that's, to me, that's the biggest success of our ecosystem in the past 7 years.
You still very much avoided, actually, to give yourself a bit of credit of what you have achieved. And I have to say that, as someone who is an outside observer, after talking also to one of the first entrepreneurs who became part of the Endeavor network and how they have observed it. And they said, well, our ecosystem is so good because there is Endeavor. This is why we are so much ahead. I guess in some way you did a magic. I would like to know, how did you come to the programs and the mechanisms and the initiatives that you at some point developed? And actually, that's actually a great question. So I guess you can have a certain inspiration from the global Endeavor network. And still some of the programs, they cannot be just copy-pasted from the regions that they were placed in or developed in. So you had to have a more individualized and more regional approach to how you're going to develop this ecosystem, because it's very specific. The culture is different, and the understanding of the entrepreneurs is different, and their background often is different. Now I see that also in between the different countries in Southeast Europe. Though we have a lot in common, there are also certain differences, so you have to follow a different approach. What did you learn from these, maybe even trials and errors that you had with the initiatives about the developing an entrepreneurial ecosystem in Bulgaria? How did you understand now the mechanisms that kind of like make sense that we should implement in order to support this ecosystem, to support entrepreneurial thinking and social initiative? and maybe grow this bubble bigger?
I think the main part is, like in any entrepreneurial venture, is to constantly ask yourself about your relevance and how are you useful to all those that you are there to serve. So that was probably, and still is, very much the main driving force for me and for Endeavor, for the team of Endeavor. We try to ask ourselves on a regular basis, how are we useful to the people we're working with? Yeah. It's embedded in our strategic planning process, it's embedded in our playbooks, etc., etc. So this is how we came up with most of the things we do. Of course, we use the know-how and sort of the pattern that the global organization has provided us. But we did quite a few innovations, to be honest. Some of them surprised the global organization, and they mainly stem from the fact that there's specific needs of this particular ecosystem, and you are trying to address those needs. And if there is no one else that addresses them better than you, then it's your opportunity
job.
and job and duty to do this.
Yeah.
For example, this is how we started Dare to Scale program. As I mentioned, we are very much focused as a global organization in the scale-up phase of development of the entrepreneurs. However, a few years ago, we realized that the scale-up space has its shades of gray. And in our case here, at the time, you had quite a few resources helping entrepreneurs in their startup phase, idea stage, MVP, etc., etc. And then we were sitting up on the hill, working with the big bubbles, and there was nothing in between. So the mortality rate between the startup phase and the scale-up phase was quite significant.
Okay.
And at the time, we didn't have the resources or the tools to help those early growth companies to bridge this gap. So naturally, we came up with a tool set which was Dare to Scale.
Why was the mortality rate so high? What was missing?
Because at the edge of being a startup and starting your hockey stick growth, you change the paradigm of how you do your business. As a startup, it's all about the skill set of the founder, if you wish, his big idea, and which is mostly executed by his two hands and his partners and a small team. Further on, it's about the vision of the founders and an organization that has to deliver on this vision. And these are two completely different ways of doing business. Okay. So the founders need to grow out of this initial role into something else. The organization needs to grow into this as well. And then you have added complexities like international markets, fundraising, etc., etc., etc. So that's a very different ball game, and you need some guidance of how to play it. Not that it cannot be learned by trial and error, but it will cost you a lot of bruises, time, and money to learn it. And sometimes you just fail along the way.
I see myself also with the Recursive in a stage where I'm afraid of the blind spots. Like sometimes I'm thinking maybe there are risks that I'm actually not seeing. Maybe there is something, that everyone knows that we're going to suck at it or we're going to, fuck it up, but I just don't see it. And it makes me paranoid. And in this regard, because we were part also of the Dare to Scale program, I really valued the fact that we could speak to people who walk this path, who has been through that, and who can actually say, so yeah, it's very clear Yeah, of course it's clear for you. But this is how I see it, this is how I will do it, and this is what you should actually focus on. So I appreciate now, how to put it, like the wisdom of people who have been through that much higher than any investment that you can actually get. And this is, I think, also one of the big misconceptions that people have about acceleration programs, because are they giving money? No, then we're not interested. And at the same time, you know, a good advice can can be so much more valuable for your business.
Acceleration programs won't give you anything that you can't read in a good book. But nothing replaces this interaction among the people who are gathered there. So it is very much a social platform for the entrepreneurs to not just correct their mistakes, but also to get encouraged about the things they do right. Because sometimes you see the opportunity and it just seems too big to attack.
And you're not there.
Exactly. So all these people, it's a wisdom, but it's a collective wisdom.
Yeah.
Because it's amazing when you hear from all of our entrepreneurs that regardless of how successful they are, that they have learned something from a random conversation at one of the events or programs that we've had. And again, going back to the curiosity part as a main trait of the entrepreneurship, this is what keeps you afloat. This is what keeps you riding the wave. You have to be curious, and you have to. Everyone can teach you something.
Yeah, that's true. Can you share also a couple of words about the main program? So you realized at some point that in order for us to have a systemic progress, that we need to address exactly this chasm, this big hole where so many startups die before they become scale-ups. But what is there for the scale-ups? How do you help them? How do you support them? What do they need?
It's a big world out there.
It is.
So being big as a entrepreneurial venture, as a company, is a very relative thing. There's always a bigger fish, as they say in Star Wars. So there are challenges of growing globally. And this is our mission, actually, to help those companies, those entrepreneurs, to find these pathways, to find these resources that can help them really become these big bubbles that create this high impact on the local ecosystem, but probably even wider. And quite often it still goes down to the very same things that are relevant for the smaller companies, but just the scale is different. You still need the know-how. You still need the help of those mentors, those peers from around the world that can tell you, how do you operate in Colombia? How do you operate in Saudi Arabia? How do you operate in Indonesia? It's a very common discussion that it's one thing to run an organization of 50 people. It's a different thing to run an organization of 200 people, and a completely different thing to run an organization of 2,000 people. So there are challenges at each stage, and there are people with experience that can help you at each stage. You need obviously also quite a bit of capital to grow into this size. So although initially you work with angel investors or local VCs or regional VCs, at some point you need the kind of tickets that only the big guys can provide. And working with the big guys is, again, different ballgame. It's about generating this trust. It's about presenting yourself. It's about being promoted in a proper way. And again, an international network of trust helps in this process a lot. Because for some of the big investors, it's more or less irrelevant. I remember we had this situation a few years ago. We were in the Valley talking to some investors. Back then, they were very arrogant. And they would say, look, if you want our money, you come here. We invest on a Uber distance. Or if they were more generous, they would say on a Tesla distance. So they said, if you're whether you're in Sacramento or in Sofia, it's all the same to us. You're not going to get our money. You have to come here. Apart from just the sheer arrogance of this statement, it also comes from the fact that they don't have the resources to get to know this other country, this other market, this other geography, where some very interesting projects come out of. Organization like Endeavor is a kind of a seal of approval for them to venture into this new geography, and we see it happening more and more often. For example, through our global co-investment fund, Endeavor Catalyst.
I was just about to ask you to what extent the Endeavor Catalyst Fund and also being part of the global Endeavor network is, but you said it, a seal of approval. And Catalyst did their first investment in our region?
First two last year.
Last year?
Yeah.
Payhawk.
Payhawk and Alcatraz, yeah.
And Alcatraz afterwards, yes, as well. Yeah, that's true.
And that, again, gives some courage to the international investors to look into geographies that they don't have a permanent presence in, and gives them the comfort to actually go there. And for a region like ours, where we do need a lot of scale-up capital, this is important. You know?
It is. It is. It is actually also one of the critical resources that we need in order to really grow global companies. Because you mentioned Payhawk, and I remember the event of last year, and I remember your report that you published, and I wanted to speak a bit more about it. So last year you made a very thorough, was it last year?
Beginning of last year.
Beginning of last year. You made a very thorough analysis of what is happening in the ecosystem. What do we need in order to get to the next level? Can you maybe share a bit about the key takeaways from them? And do you see we are on the right trajectory 1 year later?
I do believe so.
Okay.
I do believe that our ecosystem now has all the necessary parts in place. We have the scaled down model of what it should look like, this success machine. And it's now a matter of adding more resources, more fuel to this machine, so it can really become a unicorn hatchery or something.
Okay.
Unicorns as such, you know,
these mythical creatures.
These mythical creatures, they're all nice and they're very important because they attract attention. But what is most important to me is the way we produce the unicorns. It's one thing to produce a unicorn just as a random mistake of the nature. It's another thing to produce it as a result of systematic work of the entire ecosystem. In our own market, Payhawk for me is a very good example of the latter, because it was conceived within a very successful organization, being Telerik, which in itself, as the founders of Telerik themselves would be the first to admit was a random success. You know, they were doing the right thing at the right time, and they made it. But then Payhawk got the spirit within this organization. Then it was helped by the founders of Telerik, by everyone else, with advice, contacts, capital, to get to this level where they are now.
True.
And that's a pattern, that's a model that we already have in place as an infrastructure. We just need to strengthen the individual components of this infrastructure so that we can produce more of those successes on a regular basis and with even probably larger scale.
I wonder if it's not already the time also for us to maybe outline a bigger vision. Like, where do we want to be in, I don't know. Now I think everyone is speaking about 2080 or 2050. We see the fastest grown ecosystems usually had a very clear vision of where do they want to come, they want to get. I'm speaking here of the startup nation in Israel. I'm speaking here of Singapore. They actually wrote it down and they outlined it. Do you think we are ready to do that? You know, to share this vision together and to work a bit more consistently towards it? Because it still feels like we are, you know, celebrating our successes. We're celebrating the unicorn. We're going to celebrate Ampeco now and so many companies. But in order to have it on a systemic level, this machine needs to...
You're quite right, actually. Yeah. Regardless of the fact that I'm a pathological optimist by nature, I would say that we're doing very well on the tactical and strategical element of all this, but we have a lot of work to do on the visionary part.
Yeah.
So yes, we do have this machine put in place. We start to, you know, spin the wheel, but we are still not clear where do we want to take this machine to.
Because for me, this opens up also a big question of identity, like who we are, what kind of hub do we want to be, what kind of ecosystem do we want to be, how are we going to contribute to the world in this huge patchwork from a small Bulgaria. And what I really enjoy about startups and also innovation is that it doesn't matter how big you are. Look at Estonia. You can produce really game-changing innovations from a very small country just because you're very focused in your efforts.
You know, I also strongly believe in natural evolution. And, you know, my past as a consultant has scarred me forever, and I strongly believe in processes.
Which is a good perspective,
True.
especially being in a startup ecosystem.
And that's why I'm still quite a bit optimistic about the direction that we're heading. Although this direction is unclear, but I know that we have all the right tools to get to a good place. What I mean is that we have the necessary process, the necessary infrastructure, that if it starts to work well, there's still some elements, and it's mainly around the role of the legislation, the role of the government and the state and all this, but that's a separate topic. But we have all these pieces that are starting to work together, and they move forward. And it just might be that the more critical mass we accumulate, then the vision will become more clear. You know, the lenses will start to focus for us into something that's really our competitive advantage. Having said that, I do believe that we can now afford to start to have to spend more time on dreaming as an ecosystem, as a society, of where we want to end up or to go to. Forums like Power of BG are a very good example of this.
Yes.
Just having this collective brainstorming, brain trusts, that can produce this big vision is very important. And
brain trust, I love this section, this definition.
So we have to spend more time dreaming now to see where we're going.
And individually for you, what is the bravest dream that you can have about the ecosystem?
My big dream that I've laid down as a vision to my board recently for the next 3 years is to be a very active part in building an ecosystem with number of well-structured, well-funded, and resourceful players, each focusing on a particular niche of the ecosystem. Whether this should be the capital supply side, where you have VCs providing early stage money, early stage funding at idea stage, or working with tech transfer offices towards up towards the scale-up capital, or very importantly, the support infrastructure, having organizations that work with students, like Innovator, like
Entrepreneurs in Class.
Entrepreneurs in Class, of course.
Yes.
Or working with universities and having good incubators and accelerators at the universities, like Elevate in AUBG, or working with young professionals like Able, having advocacy and policy making, policy lobbying organizations like BESCO, for example, media, specialized media like the Recursive, Forbes, and everyone else. So specialized players that do a great job and work with each other. That creates a strong ecosystem for me. And yes, we see our role being an active supporter of all of this process happening.
So you're like the synergizer between them? Do you see yourself as...
We aspire to be.
Yes,
we aspire to be. I also dream of an ecosystem that's a little bit of a perpetuum mobile, that feeds on its own success. So we're thinking of ways how we can recycle the success of the ecosystem back into the infrastructure that creates it.
Yes.
That's a big idea, big dream for me. And thirdly, it's about what we mentioned earlier, creating these links between and among the countries in our region. Because just as no man is an island in our own country, in our own ecosystem, we stand a much better chance as a region rather than as an individual country.
I was recently thinking that Bucharest, Sofia, even Cluj now, Istanbul, Athens, they're not innovation hubs really in themselves. It's more like it's like an axis of hubs, because the more companies grow, the more they actually use the resources of the whole region. We see investments happening cross-border. We see talent also, talent acquisition happening cross-border. I mean, you can have your company in Sofia still grow a wonderful team in Romania. And we see that now more and more happening. What about the other resources of innovation? What about universities? What about and all the others?
True, absolutely
true.
So
I think the more we understand ourselves as a region, the better we are going to use these resources that need that we need to do innovation, and we can share them, and we're going to grow the pie bigger. We're going to benefit from that. I don't, competition now seems so old school nowadays.
It is a competition in misery in our case,
Exactly.
And the good thing is that this new wave of entrepreneurs, this new generation, has gotten over the historical prejudice or the cultural prejudice that we have in abundance in our region, and clearly realizes what we are talking about, that it's only working together when you stand a better chance, of being noticed, getting more resources, and succeeding eventually. So we see it more and more, to my satisfaction. There's still a long way to go, but the first steps are there. The pattern, the map is on the table. We know where we need to go and how to get there. It's just a matter of pushing it through.
I'm still a bit impatient. I think you and I very much in common when it comes to personality types. I haven't got to the point where I get more patient. I just at this point I feel like, okay, we celebrated enough. We need to get things done. We need to make the machine moving. We need to make the next steps. It's the way I feel. Because in a way, I feel also like the world is spinning faster and faster. And,
true. That's the biggest challenge, I would say.
Exactly. And we're in competition, and there is also a train that we can miss. So I really hope that I truly believe in how do they call it? Visualizing. Do you know that? Have you heard of it?
No.
So it's like, dreaming, wishing for things, but also visualizing them. And, looking at these little elements that kind of like bring you in a situation of a projected future. So you shared now the dream of, okay, this is, the mechanism where we recycle the success. I really love, by the way, this concept. Where we understand ourselves as one big region that is positioning itself maybe as a common brand to the world and makes a statement together to the world. A synergized ecosystem where all the players understand their contribution to the big whole. And I dream of a very similar thing. And I wanted us to think maybe, okay, how would we know that we have achieved that? I mean, maybe in 5 years we can sit together. I think 5 years is...
That's reasonable.
It is reasonable amount of time. How would we know that we got there?
The most visible sign would be when we have strong regional VCs.
Okay.
Coming out of any of the countries we are talking about. We already have some from Bulgaria, but they need to, again, gain further size.
Yes.
When we have common platforms for growing entrepreneurs. We are working on a couple of those with our friends in Endeavor Romania. We are now talking about the Western Balkans. And this is just us. There must be others as well. Also, as much as possible, unifying or at least inspiring each other in terms of developing a forward-looking legislation, a forward-looking regulatory environment.
Here I'm okay with competition, by the way. So these governments, they can
True.
compete.
And that's,
so
make them jealous of each other.
Exactly.
That's how it works.
It usually works in the Balkans.
And we can provoke this. That's the good thing. We can provoke it.
Yes.
So that's when you would start to say that you can start to say that we're talking the same language, same entrepreneurial language. Okay. And you said it, when the companies would find it irrelevant whether they're growing their team in Sofia or Bucharest. They can do both with a similar ease. And for them, it would be a matter of practicality rather than anything else.
Yes, exactly. Well, then we have a date in 5 years.
Looking
We
forward.
sit together. And then I'm going to ask you the big questions about the big future. I think now we need to focus on, okay, let's do the next 5 years, and then we're going to think, okay, what comes next? Which are going to be the challenges then? I'm very curious.
As I said, it's now the time when we can really afford and allow ourselves to start dreaming big.
Yes.
There were so many small steps that we had to take until now in order to get where we are. And now that we have this platform, we have gotten on this hill, we can really dream about the top.
The next hill. It's always like this in life. Momchil, thank you. Thank you for this conversation. It's been a real pleasure. I'm sure that we will be working very closely in the future together because, many, many reasons. You know them all, especially on the regional aspect. I think it is the right timing. With the Recursive, I think we were a bit lucky and we hit a nerve exactly at the moment where this kind of identity started developing. So regional platforms are necessary, inclusively platform like Endeavor. And I think about my big dreams, then maybe we can sync up. But they are not much different than yours.
We'll be dreaming together.
Exactly. I like this message from you. Maybe we should really dream a bit for now and then we get into the next steps. But we need to still sit together and form a vision.
True.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you, Irina.
Next on the Recursive podcast, we meet with Dimitar Enchev, managing partner at Postscriptum Ventures, a private equity fund focused on sustainability and energy transition.
We're going to also have to become a lot smarter about how we use energy, right? Because if one way to lower emissions is by using less energy, right? So, of course, I'm not talking about, going back to the caveman days, right? Or, building a hippie commune, but we need to become more intelligent about how we do energy. And the way to do that is to digitalize, right? So digitalize, decentralize, decarbonize, right? Those are the three big trends in the energy sector. So the way we use energy and electricity is going to have to overlap with the IT sector a lot, right? And there is a lot of opportunity there. In fact, there is a recently announced Series A by a Bulgarian company called Ampeco that does basically operating systems for charging points for electric cars, right?
Super proud of you guys.
Yeah, and they're fantastic, and they're kind of putting this whole thing, and I would like to think that we're doing the same. This whole big topic, they're putting it on the map, right? They're kind of attracting attention for the next founder to think about. Okay, well maybe I can do something with electric cars,
Yes.
So, getting back to my attempt to systematize the opportunity or what needs to happen for the world to decarbonize, right? So you have electricity and transportation and industry, we already covered a lot of electrification, a lot of green energy, a lot of decentralization and digitalization. And then you have some areas that are hard to abate, some more difficult areas where we're going to have to be even more creative. So, for example, buildings, right? When you build a large building, you use a lot of concrete and you use a lot of steel. Both are very carbon intensive. Well, we actually have an investment, which is a really cool investment. It's back to basics, but it's one of my favorite investments. We bought the largest sawmill in Uruguay, and we invested like 25 million to build a CLT facility. CLT is a cross-laminated timber.
Okay.
And it's basically timber that you can build a skyscraper out of, right? It's basically processed in such a way that you can actually use it to
like a real one, not a
yes,
model of it.
Absolutely. And when you think about it, right, you're replacing steel and concrete by wood, right?
Isn't that bad also? I mean,
No.
we spoke about deforestation,
No, so
deforestation, I'm sorry.
the way that you have to manage it, right? You can't cut virgin forest. So you have to make sure that the forest that you're using is what's called sustainable forest, right? So basically, you take less than what the forest produces each year, right? So you're an equilibrium, and you take it in a sustainable way. And in fact, this actually promotes a healthy forest, right? So we do that in Uruguay. But also the logic behind why this is good for the climate crisis, for emissions, is that trees, as they grow, they suck up carbon from the atmosphere. That's what they're made of, right?
Yes.
They suck up CO2 and produce oxygen through photosynthesis. So in a way, what you're doing by building a skyscraper out of wood is that you're actually locking that carbon, you're sucking it out of the atmosphere. So you're not only carbon negative, so you're not only carbon neutral, you're actually carbon negative. You're sequestering carbon in the building, right? And people are doing green cement, or people are doing green steel, and all sorts of innovation is happening in this space, right? And
what about recycling?
And of course, recycling, that's a big topic, right? What we're doing, we're here in Bulgaria. We're kind of, I think there is 2 procedures against Bulgaria for not recycling and for not utilizing waste, right? So we're just putting it in the ground, we're just landfilling it.
At the same time, I visited at some point an event where the lecturers were also putting the whole thing into perspective, and we're saying that there is a huge opportunity in waste, and the innovators who are going to utilize waste, they're going to be extremely successful. That's actually a huge opportunity, because we are producing more and more waste.
Yeah.
And it's gold.
It
turns out that now waste is actually gold.
Yeah, and literally there is actually gold in it, right? So, but no, it is valuable.
It's the waste rush.
and there is economic opportunity in that as well. I mean, that's how the economy is supposed to work, right? If you're doing something that society needs, right, which is what we just mentioned, you're supposed to make money. So there is supposed to be economic opportunity in that. So that's a good thing, Economic signals are supposed to point you in the right direction, right?
Yes.
And if you are just as passionate about innovation as we are, hit subscribe for the Recursive podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We're everywhere.